Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. It is a pleasure to be here and to have a chance to follow my colleague, Carolyn Clancy, who has nicely described to you many of the ways in which AHRQ and NIH have been working together on CER and the ways in which we look forward to the future in this new format involving the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, which is an experiment somewhat unprecedented in terms of having a 501c3 organization empowered with surveying the landscape, identifying opportunities and needs, and then asking government agencies, particularly NIH and AHRQ, because we are identified in that legislation as a sort of first refusal place to go, to assist in trying to provide the data that's necessary to guide decision making. And we welcome that, even as we are not entirely sure, as I bet you aren't either, exactly how this is going to play out. So I thought I would try in a complementary fashion, at least I hope so, to what Carolyn has spoken to you about already, to say something about NIH's role in CER, which is, I think, very synergistic with what you've just heard, but has a somewhat different focus in that NIH in general has as its focus particularly the design and conduct of controlled trials to assess effectiveness of various interventions. And those have been part of our portfolio for quite a long time, but certainly in the current climate are being seen as particularly important for providing the data that decision makers would like to have. So let me just say a little bit about the NIH and its background, although I know we're familiar to many of you, and then show some examples of the kinds of research that we're excited about doing right now. Our mission statement has a twofold focus: science in pursuit of fundamental knowledge about the nature and behavior of living systems. That's our basic science agenda, and a very important one it is, because this is the foundation upon which many applications ultimately get built. And some people seem to think that that's all that NIH does, that we're basic scientists, but in fact, roughly half of our effort is focused on applications to extend healthy life and reduce the burdens of illness and disability. The way in which the institutes are organized is something that only Congress could design, but it sort of works. We have 27 institutes and centers, many of which came into being because of a desire to have focus on a particular disorder or collection of disorders. As the NIH director, I sit there in that little circle in the middle called OD, the director's office. And yet the extremely high capability of the institute directors and their collegiality and determination to work together actually makes this engine go with great effectiveness. And it's been a joy for me to have a chance to be in that position for the last year and a month. The circles there that are in orange have only extramural components. That is, they only give out grants. All of the others that you see in blue have an intramural component with scientists who are working as government employees, most of them on the campus at Bethesda, although we have other units as well. And however, most of the budget, even in those institutes, goes out in grants to the extramural community, to people who send us their best ideas, and we aim to try to support them. So if you wanted to look at that as a pie chart of where the money is currently going, for the FY 2010 budget, $31 billion, about 84% of that goes into the extramural program, supporting over 325,000 scientists and research personnel at over 3,000 institutions, and the remainder for intramural research plus our research management and support, as you can see in the chart. Currently, because budgets have been tight for some time, we are only able to fund about 1 out of every 6 grant applications that come to us, which is a source of considerable anxiety and frustration both for grantees and for reviewers, and frankly for me as well. We clearly have more ideas and more creative scientists than we have support to give to them. And this puts us constantly in a position of trying to figure out what the right priorities are for the distribution of the funds we have. Certainly $31 billion is a lot of money, and it's a wonderful credit to the way in which this country has developed its superlative contributions to medical research, that this kind of commitment has been there all along. But it is still, in the current circumstance, with so many opportunities, insufficient for us to be able to do everything we would like to. And so we're constantly sitting around tables trying to figure out what are we going to do less of in order to do a bit more of something else that is particularly innovative and in need of support. When I came to NIH a little more than a year ago, I thought it would be useful to survey the landscape a bit and see if there were exceptional areas of opportunity that would serve as a bit of a guide to where we might take our thinking as far as priorities for NIH. And out of that came this brief article in Science from last January, which outlined a series of 5 themes that seemed particularly ripe for investment. These are not focused on any specific disease. They're cross-cutting as far as diseases. But they are areas where things are poised for rapid progress, and it seemed good to point that out. One is to apply high-throughput technologies, and that includes genomics and proteomics and some imaging approaches and nanotechnology and computational biology, to really understand fundamental biology at a much more precise molecular level than we've been able to do in the past. And it's exhilarating to see the way in which these opportunities have emerged, many of them coming from the Genome Project. But of course, that would be insufficient for living up to the other part of our mission, is to try to improve human health. And so we are also pushing hard on the translational part to take those basic discoveries and move them as quickly as possible into therapeutics and diagnostics. This one is particularly relevant for today's conversation, putting science to work for the benefit of healthcare reform, which certainly includes CER, but also a variety of other approaches, such as additional research in healthcare economics, trying to understand a bit better pharmacogenomics and personalized medicine. And a fourth area with the opportunities that are there, and I think the sense of great excitement in the scientific community about applying those efforts towards diseases that occur perhaps more commonly elsewhere than in our own country. Wouldn't this be a good time to make such an investment and to have the United States serving to outreach to those in other countries who are looking for help here as far as new research incentives, and also to help them build their own research capacity? That then seems like an ideal place to also turn our attention. And the fifth is really about the community, the investigators who are empowering the whole enterprise by their energies, but need to be empowered as well by what NIH can do to support this. And that means our grants program and our peer review process, and it means our training programs to try to recruit the next generation to come and join us, all of which are extremely important and frankly are particularly challenging at a time of difficult budgetary situations. So we're going to talk now primarily, though, about this third bullet, putting science to work for the benefit of healthcare reform, and particularly about CER. So CER at NIH has actually been going on for quite some time. If you look at this particular slide, does this pointer actually point? Oh, no, it goes backwards when you hit that. Oh, maybe there's a pointer. No, there's not a pointer. Well, never mind. If you look at the one that's marked $83 million, that is the All-Hat study, which looked at hypertension interventions to see whether, in fact, there was a difference in effectiveness between very cheap interventions and those that are much more expensive, and concluded that actually diuretics work pretty well for most people with hypertension. Just below that, a prostate cancer screening trial to assess whether PSA screening changes mortality. Again, sort of comparing, do you do it or do you not? Comparative effectiveness question. Lower right, the CATIE study, C-A-T-I-E, that looked at antipsychotics in patients with chronic schizophrenia, and concluded in that case, as with the All-Hat study, that some of the older drugs were actually just as effective and considerably cheaper.